Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman. I'm here with Gene Marks. Welcome back, Gene.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be back here in the U.S.
I know you've been traveling. It's great to have you here and have a chance to chat again.
A couple weeks in Norway is where I was, and I can't recommend it more highly. It was a fantastic place to go. High taxes, but free education and pension. It's a weirdly socialist country, because they pay all these taxes. They have all these government services. And yet the people that I met there were pretty independent, almost like right wingers. You know what I mean? It was like a really weird mix of a country. But it's absolutely beautiful there and people were super nice. Anyway, strongly recommend going.
Interesting. All right. I want to point out that we're actually recording this late on Friday. Things have been happening quickly lately. In fact, the Trump administration has just announced that the tariffs on goods coming from Canada, Mexico, and China are in fact going to go into effect. So I just want to acknowledge, who knows what else is going to happen between now and Monday morning when this is published. The topic we want to talk about, Gene, is what this all means for small businesses. You wrote a piece recently talking about small business optimism, noting that it's at a 6-year high. You started the story with a quote from Bill Dunkelberg, who's the chief economist for the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Let me read it to you. Small business owners feel more certain and hopeful about the economic agenda of the new administration. Expectations for economic growth, lower inflation, and positive business conditions have increased in anticipation of pro-business policies and legislation in the new year. You added that many of your clients are equally bullish. The line that really hit me was the one about small business owners feel more certain. It seems to me there's a lot of uncertainty out there. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as you know, I'm also optimistic, but but not for 2025 at least. I mean, I think 2025 is going to be a very uncertain year. Let me lay out some things. You're listening to this right now. You got everybody listening to me here. You got to be aware of some of this stuff that's happening this year, because you got businesses to run. So let me start actually with labor. Okay, just I'll start there. I do, and you introduced me I do this podcast with Paychex, and Paychex they're like a big HR company, so I'm pretty close with them, and they see so many of their customers having compliance issues. I mean, that's the kind of services they provide, but there's this a lot more questions and a lot more activity there. Why? Well, we have a relatively pro-business administration now in Washington, the Trump administration, we think. But Trump's line, his administration line is more of a federalist, pushing more of these things down to states. So we're going to see over the next few years, not a whole lot of regulations coming out of the federal government. Overtime rules already have been rolled back from what the Biden administration proposed. Minimum wage is, I don't expect there to see any change there. Any hope of there being any kind of paid leave or anything more on the retirement side, all of that stuff it's really going to be held back. The only thing on the retirement side, by the way, just as an aside here, Lauren, is that the Secure Act in 2025 now, what goes into effect is if you have a relatively new 401k plan, you're now required to automatically enroll your employees. Just want to make sure people are aware of that. But that's the biggest thing from on the federal side. It's all going down to the states. So you're okay, it's that's great. No big dictates coming in from the federal government. Yay, they're pro-business. But the states are active. I mean, more than 70 local jurisdictions and states are raising the minimum wages this year. A number of states have higher overtime regulations than the federal government has now. A number of states have mandates for paid time off and sick leave, and they're changing as well. Mandatory retirement plans. 8 states this year are going to have new laws around AI because, again, under the Trump administration, they're going to be hands off on this stuff. So, yeah, it's more pro-business, from, in Washington. But now instead of just dealing with a national regulation or a law, now suddenly you're running a business. You got to deal with 50 different states regulations. And I mean, even if you're located in Illinois, which, maybe that's a bad example. Say you're located in Georgia and there's relatively lesser regulations than New York State or California. Well, you have remote employees that are all around the country. They might be in New York or California. You might have to be compliant with those rules, So you talk about uncertainty when it comes to the whole, the regulations, the workplace regulations, all that. That's why, Paychex provides their services. I'm going to buy some of their stock. I mean, it's like they're going to be busy because as a business owner, how do you keep up with all of this stuff? That's a lot of uncertainty right there, and that's just that issue. And I have
you're talking about labor, and you haven't even mentioned the immigration issue, which could be the big factor.
So let's talk about that as well. Yeah. So as you know, I've always been like, hey man, if you're employing illegal immigrants, tough shit on you. You're breaking the law, and that is what it is. Well, I'm going to write a piece next week for the Inquirer that is going to be about even if you think you're in compliance, you need to make triple sure that you are, because there's going to be more, enforcement on this stuff and potentially more raids on it. And, even just going through the exercise to make sure that all of your workers have the documentation and blah, blah, blah. That's going to be a pain in the neck, and it's going to be like more work for business owners. And if those illegal immigrants do get deported and they disappear, and yes, those businesses should not have been hiring them anyway. Those businesses, if they don't want to go out of business, are still going to need to find employees, and it's a shrinking pool of employees. So there's that issue,
Which means it's going to affect potentially all businesses, not just businesses who lose employees.
Exactly right. And then, of course, if there is a pullback on the H-1B visas, or, people with, with talent that you want to stay here, and there's rules around there. It's messy. I mean, like you and I don't have to have the debate about whether this should be done or how it's being done or whatever. It's that more uncertainty. It's going to be more tightening in the labor market, which is going to be tougher. If you're like in the construction business, if you're in the like hotel, hospitality, restaurant business, it's just going to be more challenging. And again, I know a lot of business owners that are 100% behind what, the Trump administration is doing with their immigration policy, but they also, are bracing for the fact that it's going to be tough going for, potentially tough going if they're in certain industries, which then brings me to tariffs, I mean, I know a lot of business owners that are behind Trump's policies, behind tariffs, but they also know that they could very well be inflationary. And Trump is could be. Well, it depends on the products. It depends on the mix. It depends where you're getting your products from. It depends on the industry. There's a lot of depends on there, but there are some companies.
Well, I think if you do put in 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, there's going to be inflation,
assuming
right?
that you're buying goods from Canada and Mexico. I don't know. I don't. I mean, right? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, but it's going to have broad impact. It's just like the immigration. It's not just going to affect the businesses that do the importing.
Right. And then the question is, you don't know how long of an impact it will have, and if businesses can absorb these costs and they can do something else other than raise their prices. There's a lot that we don't know. And we also don't even know how long these tariffs are going to last, because as we've seen, Trump is using these not just as an economic thing, but as a negotiating tactic for whatever his reasons are. And that's just Canada and Mexico. Obviously, we have China and Southeast Asia and other areas. That's more uncertainty. And again, in the end, this might all play out great for the American economy and great for America and all that kind of stuff. And business owners are saying they're optimistic. Cool, they're all optimistic, but there's going to be some waves we have to go through this year. And I have another one, which is the whole tax thing. You and I have talked about taxes before, and I'm like, I'm very, very happy that it seems like my taxes will not go up because the Trump administration and the GOP is supporting, making permanent the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But listen, there's no guarantee on that. They have a slim majority in Congress, and the Democrats are asking reasonable questions like, how the hell is this going to be paid for? So it's going to be a lot of give and take. We don't know what's going to go through, what's not going to go through. Will the small business pass-through deduction survive? Will the capital expenditures to deduction? Will it research and development? All that we don't know, and I'm expecting there to be more clarity about this stuff by the middle of the year once Congress turns its attention to it and debates it and all of that. But in the meantime, again, you're running a business. This is like 20% of your income usually, or somewhere around that for your taxes. So like, what do you do? You know what I mean? Like, so that's my point, is that I get that businesses are optimistic, Lauren, and I am optimistic long-term. I really am. But, maybe because I'm just glasses half full, but at the same time, let's all wake up, guys. Like this year, there's going to be a lot of shit that we're going to have to be dealing with. So buckle up and be prepared, right? I mean, that's how I feel.
I guess I'm a little bit surprised because this is kind of the agenda that you've been backing for some time. We've had numerous conversations about these issues. This is kind of what you wanted, I think.
Yeah, I don't know why you're surprised. I just said to you, I'm optimistic as well long term. Yeah, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have to go through some pain and some turbulence during this year. I mean, of course. I mean, there's going to be all of that.
It kind of seems like we're going after pain that we didn't have to go after.
So sure. I mean, I think again, we can argue the reasons and the whys and all that, and I think that's more of a political discussion that we can have as to why it's being done. But I can tell you that it is being done. Everybody's been very surprised at all the stuff that Trump has been doing over the past 2 weeks. And I'm like, I don't know why you're so surprised. He said he was going to do all of these things beforehand. So if as a business owner, and I've been telling this to my clients since November, make your plans. Perfect example is tariffs. I mean, I have one like decent sized manufacturing client that's based in central Pennsylvania that buys stuff, from China and overseas. When Trump got elected, they went into action. They started buying a lot of inventory in advance and renegotiating deals and finding other sources of supply. I mean, they're not idiots. They can see what's coming. And they're Trump supporters. They think long term, the tariffs will have a good effect and change the landscape for trade that'll be more favorable to them long term. But they realize, they're running a business. They got to make, they got to make their plans and make sure they can navigate the disruption that's going to be occurring while this stuff shakes out. So that's what it is.
We've actually had a lot of conversations about the tariffs on this podcast, and I would just say it's not. You don't have to be an idiot to not be sure what your next step is. There are a lot of complications. It's not obvious for everybody. And I also point out, again, we're talking on Friday. The Wall Street Journal ran a story today saying that Trump's own advisors are, working around the clock trying to avoid the implementation of these tariffs. So yes, he said all along he's going to do this. It's not a complete surprise, but even right up until today, there's been speculation that, maybe it was kind of a bluff and he's going to get what he wants out of it and we won't have the tariffs, which also undercuts kind of the main argument in favor of the tariffs, I think, which is the idea that it's going to encourage manufacturing in this country. If you don't know for sure what the playing field is going to look like, it's hard to invest money in increasing domestic manufacturing, don't you think?
Yeah. I understand, Lauren, but I mean, also, if just where Trump is coming from, Canada's economy is the size of Texas. Mexico's economy is the size of Florida. Okay, so our economy is so much larger than Canada and Mexico, and if Trump feels that there is a trade imbalance or that American companies are not getting a fair deal, however he feels. There is the American, from his standpoint, he has way more negotiating influence. And if that means if Canada or Mexico are going to let these tariffs go through, America has way more resources and ability to withstand a tariff negotiation or a tariff fight or a tariff war than Canada and Mexico do. And ultimately, he's, this is his bet, is that, given our size and our over proportionate comparison to these countries, ultimately the U.S. is going to win out. He's going to he's going to get what he wants, and so.
But there's potential for a lot of collateral damage along the way.
It could be along the way, but then again, there's I think he's looking longer term. That's what he is. But again, like I said, we don't I don't want to get political as to why he's doing it. I think this is a small business show, and I think that business owners they're optimistic. Which gets back to my column, and I fair enough that they're optimistic, but let's all be aware that this year is going to be very disruptive and tumultuous. So we need to make sure we're buckling up.
I guess listening to you talk, I'm almost wondering, why were they so optimistic? I mean, the certainty issue is something that business owners talk about all the time. They just want to know what the rules are going to be and be able to adapt accordingly. And so much is now up in the air that wasn't up in the air before. So that's one thing. Plus, you've got.
But I mean, the reason why they're up in the air is because a lot of the the rules, the regulations in Washington, the trade imbalances that we have with all of these countries. These are all things that were disfavorable to the U.S. So they're going to need to change, and change is hard. I mean, it's the whole "who moved my cheese" issue. So yeah, things have to change. I mean, unrelated to small business, Trump has proposed, disbanding the entire Department of Education in Washington, just discontinuing it. And let me tell you, there are a lot of educators that I know when they see the test scores that were just reported this past week at a 30 or low, that take a step back and say, yeah, you know what? Maybe that is what needs to happen in this country, is that there is significant change. And of course, it's going to be disruptive, but maybe that's for the good, for the long term. And I think that's why some small business owners are optimistic about that. Some changes need to happen. They recognize, though, that whenever you have change, there's always going to be stuff to deal with. But, it's a long-term decision. You get through with it, and it's better for themselves and their employees and their children over the longer term. That's why they're optimistic.
If you believe that it's going to be better.
It is all, do you believe? I agree. I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, you don't. I can tell. I do. But
well, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Of course. But then again, I believe the Phillies would make it to the World Series. So what the fuck do I know?
Well, that happened fairly recently. That's a better bet. Even looking at the tax situation that you described, my guess is that the 20% pass through that you were referring to, I think that's going to survive. Now, I don't have any special information. I could be wrong, but
I believe it will survive.
Right.
That's what you believe.
And I'm acknowledging I do not know. I have no inside information. But, that's the kind of thing that it's hard for politicians to be against, to take away a small business benefit like that.
So I'll argue against that. I'll say, that 20% deduction didn't exist before 2017.
Understood.
That was a whole new thing. You know what I mean?
Understood.
And so you can make the argument saying, we're how bad were small businesses doing before 2017? What this was, you know what I mean?
Well, and here's the point I would make about that, which is that it's been beneficial to a lot of small businesses. I think it's going to stick around. I think there might be better ways to do it. There's some adjustments that could be made, but basically, I want it to stick around. I work with small business owners. I am a small business owner. I'm not making enough money that it makes a real big difference to me.
Yeah,
but
I'm assuming it does make a big difference to you. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't.
Right. It does not?
No, because I don't make enough money. But
you're a pass-through business, right? Is 21
yes,
S S corp? All right. Well, then you get.
So I do, not for myself, but I think in some form it should continue. That said, it only helps businesses that make a profit. If you're not making a profit, that tax break, that deduction doesn't do you any good whatsoever. And a lot of the uncertainty that's being introduced has the potential to do real damage to all businesses in the form of inflation, in the form of the changes to the labor market. So, when you're weighing the potential for preserving that tax break versus the risk that's being introduced, I think that makes for a very volatile environment.
Yeah, it'll be volatile, but like you just said, I think the tax break is good. I hope it stays as well. I think it's great for small businesses, but just taking the contrarian view, my God, Lauren, the numbers, our deficits are 7% of GDP now, it's unbelievable. Our spending is we are spending close to $7 trillion a year and bringing in $5 trillion a year. And our national debt is $36 trillion. It's unbelievable, of which interest is now, our interest spending is now 17% of total government spending. In 2020, it was 10%, just so you know. So there's going to be some hard battles in Congress when they start talking about reducing taxes. You know what I mean? And even that small business pass-through deduction, it's expensive. And people are saying geez, again, small business didn't have this before 2017. if they take it away, they'll be back to then. It's not like that was the end of the world then, for sure. And we got to do something to reduce these deficits and debt. I'm just saying that's the argument that the Democrats will make, and it's a pretty damn good argument. So
I'm not sure they will.
I don't know. I know we'll be talking a lot about this because it's going to be back and forth.
Sure.
But it's a fascinating issue, and it keeps getting back to, you mentioned earlier, and I was like, teasing you about, like what you believe that this will happen. It's the same thing with the whole tax thing. I mean, you can have all these economists from Penn or Wharton make their projections, but in the end, it's like a crapshoot. If you reduce taxes by this much, what the effect will be in 2040. You know what I mean? So, people are just like, well, I believe this will be good for business. That will, small businesses will hire more and invest more with lower taxes. But a lot of it is just it's a belief thing, So
well, and that certainly applies to immigration and tariffs and everything else we're talking about. It seems pretty scary to me.
It's change. People don't like change.
What are you working on, Gene? Anything we should be looking for in the coming week?
I guess we won't have time to talk about DeepSeek, but we can talk about that next week. I can tell you what I am working on, Lauren. I went last week to Microsoft did their AI tour in New York City. I went down to the Javits Center and spent the day there going to sessions about AI from Microsoft's standpoint. And there was a lot of interesting things I learned. I'm going to write about it in Forbes this week. So it'll be fun. The one takeaway that I can have, first of all, they did a great job. It was very nice, completely free, thousands of people there. I mean, it was like high interest. But I went to a couple sessions where people from Microsoft were afraid to do live demos.
Because they wouldn't work?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, wow. Like, I was thinking to myself, you're from Microsoft and you were afraid to demo live this application. They have like a canned demo that they're showing. And they admitted, like, well, you never know. I'm like, okay, well, that's not very, comforting to know if you're selling this to businesses.
So did you see anything that got you excited?
I mean, I could tell you what another big takeaway is, before we end up is this. AI continues to be in 2025 a big company game because people are spending millions and millions of dollars on it. Very little mention of DeepSeek. That's a whole other conversation. But I will say, compared to a year ago, because I went to it last year as well, there are so many more tools available, Lauren, that if you're a business and you've got a couple $100,000 that you want to invest in your own system of AI, there are so many tools available now. They're Microsoft, their Copilot Studio, and Google has got their things. OpenAI has got their tools where you can connect your databases all together, create a large language model. There's tools, very low code applications for writing to train that model, and then start bringing back really good information about your business, like ChatGPT for your customers and your employees. Yeah, small businesses can build this stuff on their own if they want to. It's still not cheap. Again, it's probably a couple $100,000, but the tools are definitely there and available for small businesses if you were so inclined. And I was like, okay. There are some companies out there that might want to go down that road, and they're more apt to do that this year than they were, say, a year ago. It's interesting.
Did you use AI for your travels? Did you do anything?
Yeah, I am. I use ChatGPT and Perplexity for research and ChatGPT. I'm the typical small business owner. Like I use the Gen AI products because none of my applications have AI in them yet. QuickBooks and Zoho, their AI is nowhere near mature enough to use. It will be, but when they start introducing good agents, which will be happening in the next year or two. But for now, I'm on my mobile ChatGPT app all the time asking it questions. It's great. It is great. And what I've started to do, Lauren, is I do consulting work for companies. So I go and I visit them for a few days and talk to people and tour around. I do like a handful of these a year. And then I identify a bunch of areas where they can increase profits based on all the writings and stuff that I do. And then I write it up. And then I have a 6-month, I follow up to make sure that things are getting done. Now I'm leaning on ChatGPT a lot more. Like,
how so?
Because I'll have a whole conversation with, say, like a manager of customer service, a 45-minute conversation. I'm recording it on Otter, for example, which is an AI app that does the transcription, and then summarizes it.
I use that for my podcast.
It's great. And then I upload it to ChatGPT, and I ask ChatGPT, what recommendations would you have for this person based on this conversation for improving their productivity or doing a better job or adding profits to the company? And then ChatGPT gives me like suggestions and things. Some of them are good, some not. But it just adds to my own thoughts. Do you know what I mean?
Do you worry that your clients are going to start using ChatGPT to ask those questions instead of you?
It's so great. I'm glad you asked that question because I think that's the fundamental disconnect that people have with AI. No, because the clients that I'm talking to are so fucking busy running their own businesses. They don't have the time to do that on their own. They are literally paying me to come back to them with recommendations and advice, and then to make sure that their people are implementing those recommendations and advice. And they don't really care where it comes from. Like, fine, you got it from ChatGPT. Good for you. Came from your brain. Good for you. They can't do this themselves because they're running their businesses. Do you know what I mean? So the answer is no. I'm not concerned about my clients doing it on their own any more than I was concerned with somebody. I don't mow my own lawn when I had a house because I sucked at it. You pay somebody to do it for you. Do you know what I mean?
Well, as you've told me before, I could find a generative AI app to do this podcast with, Gene. So be careful what you wish for.
You can take this, use Google's Notebook LLM, make a huge language model, like upload all these podcasts, and then we can slice and dice it in different formats. I'm telling you, it'd be awesome.
Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, The Chicago Daily Herald, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great week, everybody.